Cool. How is everybody? I felt tired after all the carbs at lunch, so hopefully everybody's waking up a little bit. So good afternoon. I wanted to quickly start. I'm a very different style presenter, very conversational. I have a fair bit of notes on my deck that I'm going to try to refer to, so I have some specificity. I always like to start out with kind of like, who's in the room? Who are you? What do you do? Because that matters to me and what I say to you. So let's do a quick show of hands. If you work in government, raise your hand. Okay, that's a good thing. I mean, okay, good, that's fine. How about technology? Anything technology related? Yeah, there's a fair bit from some of the things from this morning. How about other textiles or apparel people? Yeah, that's what I expected. Okay, that's interesting. Consumer packaged goods, like other consumer goods. And then the catch-all consulting and or environmental. Wow, tough group. Okay, all right, so this is a really difficult presentation for me. 30 minutes, talk about sustainability in textiles, go. No context, didn't know who's in the room, didn't know what you care about. So I took kind of a different perspective on this to some extent, right? So we've got 30 minutes for this. Where's the clicker? 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 There we go. Ah! All right. So who am I, right? So I'm a 17-year vet of the outdoor apparel industry. I've been doing it my entire career. My focus is on relationship, strong teams, and transparency and integrity, especially within my supply chain. My background is in textiles and the outdoor industry, merchandising, development, supply chain, which is a word I've said. I kickstarted all the sustainability efforts at OR about 7 years ago. So a lot of what we've accomplished has certainly been something that I'm quite familiar with, and I'm off camera, so I guess I won't wander, because I do like to wander when I talk. I've been schooled in the real world. I have no formal training in sustainability. Everything that I've absorbed, everything that I've learned has come through some of the work that we've done, and I rely heavily on my friends, on my friends network, right? If you don't have a phone a friend network, you're missing out a significant amount of advice within your career and your growth, right? I see some heads nodding, right? So that's where I really owe an awful lot, which is one of the reasons I'm here today, because I like to give back to other people. So I tend to be a fairly interactive presenter, so if you have a question, feel free. But I try to angle towards what folks want to learn from me, right? So goals for today. We're going to go on a little bit of a climb together. Sorry for the outdoor images today. But I wanted you to think about things that I can share with you that are applicable to your industry. So first and foremost, we said this morning in one of the breakout groups, we're in a lonely place. Sustainability leadership tends to be understood or lack of understanding. It tends to be fairly isolating. We've talked about decision making. So first and foremost, I think these are like therapy sessions. So I want you to know this is a safe space, and we all struggle with similar issues across different platforms and industries. I want to visualize some of the complexity in approaching sustainability in the textiles and apparel space, because there's a lot of opacity that we deal with that I think other people also deal with. I want to identify some of the barriers. Come on, clicker. Some of the barriers we deal with. I want to connect climate change to all business sustainability. I think that's been pretty effectively already done today in some of the conversations. And I want to drive some transferable thinking across industries. So I focused a little bit less on, hey, here's what the outdoor industry is doing, or apparel in some senses, to combat climate change on our march to net zero. Some of that will come through. More, how did I overcome some of the challenges? What did I think through? What did I come up with that I could give you that maybe is something where you're like, oh, that's great, I love that. I've taken 3 pages of notes already in this conference. It's just things I've thought of and starred, and things from the last presentation. I'm like, man, I wish I'd thought about explaining it in that one sentence. So I'm hoping to deliver some of that to you today, very different potentially from some of the other presentations. So we're roped up together. If anybody's ever climbed mountains, you know what that means. We're going to do this together, okay? So here's OR's progress in terms of where we are as an organization. I think that there's some level setting in terms of my expertise, what we've accomplished, so that you have some level of like, where am I coming from? So outdoor research is based in Seattle. We're a 40-year-old brand. Our founder was a bit of a rebel who decided to make product because the stuff on the market wasn't good enough, and his friend got hurt climbing on Denali in Alaska. It was 40 years ago. Ron tragically passed away in an avalanche many years back. So to some extent, we have an origin story that does not be that much different from brands like Patagonia, who's very known in this space, from the North Face, from Royal Robbins, from Mountain Hardwear. So big names. That's kind of the background of our company. We successfully joined the Blue Sign system. I think I led that 5 years ago or so. That's a chemicals management group well known within textiles. One of the most sort of conservative. We're a founding member of the Climate Action Corps within the Outdoor Industry Association. We released science-aligned targets this past year, so very fresh in terms of our mind. We released our annual impact report for the first time. I know Intel was talking about that earlier in that big project to release that. We accomplished that this year. And I'm a steering committee member on the OIA's Clean Chemicals and Material Coalition. So I'm dealing at the industry level with a couple of things related to regulations, PFAS, Prop 65, and the new TSCA ruling as it relates to Congress's mandate to the EPA. So a little bit of policy expertise as well. Okay, so the big question today, like, why? Why do we care about sustainability in textiles, right? This might be a rhetorical question, but the why is actually critical. Do the customers want it? Does your marketing team want it? Do you think you can sell more if we're more sustainable? That's one of the things that's already been kind of mentioned in terms of today. So one of the things that I want to do, and I'm going to take a little bit of a quick stand here, is I'm assuming this is a safe space, right? No politics, but climate change is clearly a problem for the entire planet, right? So this is why. The Sustainable Development Goals from the UN. If what we do today, and if you take anything away from my presentation, it's think bigger. Always think bigger. So the SDG number 13 is often called one of the most important, right? 30 is swiftly approaching. Science is clear. Signatory nations are legally bound to develop plans via nationally determined contributions, right? High GHG emitting industries like the energy and transportation sectors have government incentive and regulation to do some of this. I sure as hell don't in what I do. So why? Why is important in trying to roll things up? If I'm going completely off script, if you saw the news this morning, the United States just released their 5-year report card, and it said one very overwhelming thing. Anybody know what that was? We are overwhelmingly behind. And if you live in Florida or Kentucky or some of these other states, you are going to massively see the change coming way over proportionately to Washington State, which is where I live, or Oregon to some extent. So why is because we have to act at a higher level. But, clicker, trickle down efforts into other industries and smaller organizations is just flat out not happening. So at some point, the why is because we have to, and no one else is really helping us. In fact, we're getting pressure that is taking things, we'll talk about this in a minute, away from some of these efforts. So at some level, the why here is because we have to. Okay, this one is a fun slide, and I totally stole all these off Google, so nobody take a picture of this. What's been the answer in the industry's approach in textiles, right? Icons, right? Yearly in America alone, it's estimated that 11.3 million tons of textile waste end up in landfills. That's in the US alone. The global textile and apparel industry is a major contributor to GHGs. 30 years ago, Polartec and Patagonia launched the first recycled PET fleece fabric. That's recycled plastic bottles in an apparel piece. That was 30 years ago. And we're still talking about that being innovation in sustainability in textiles. It took 10 years later for an industry-wide sustainability group to form, of which I was a member until it shifted into the Climate Action Corps, right? That was 10 years after that point, so 20 years ago. And then it was about 4 to 5 more years when Greenpeace came out with their detox campaign. If anybody remembers that, that was a huge catalyst for greener chemistry in textiles. You know how long that was ago? Like 20 years ago. So we're moving unbelievably slowly as an industry. Why? Why are we moving so slow? So do we have enough icons to make the consumers more educated? Don't get me wrong, by the way, my brand uses several of these on the board. So I'm guilty. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm on the same problem. So if we actually wanted to be more sustainable, we need to be completely honest about how much we sell, right? That's circularity, which is another piece of this. So here's a shock and awe moment in these presentations. Does anybody know what the most sustainable thing your company or organization can do for the planet? Let's go out of business. Do you know what the most sustainable thing you can do for the planet is? Die. Preferably naked and alone and in the woods. Seriously. I mean, that's the challenge that we're dealing with at a planet level. But like, how, good luck with those conversations with clients and senior executives. Are like, so we're going to stop operations because that's how we're going to get to 3 degrees Celsius. So, but that's the reality, right? That's really and truly where we are. So at some level, this is kind of what I like to say, and I've done this slide a few times now. I started using this term about 1.5 years ago to describe the issue. Has anybody heard of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks? I actually heard someone say that earlier. I'm like, damn it, you stole my line. That's okay. It's true. That's kind of what we're doing. All those icons on the previous slide, right? So how many parents are in the room? All I see is a mess. So I started kind of thinking through that. I'm like, why is this so hard? Why are there so many things we're dealing with? Why am I cleaning up so many messes, right? I totally stole that one off Google too. This is ultimately where I landed, and this is where I think the meat of the presentation is going to go. So we're going to slow down a little bit here, and I'm going to switch analogies on you. I love analogies. I'm big on analogies. In order to align and build a strategy, you need a North Star. You need to find your Polaris. So about 2 years ago, I realized we were struggling. There was so much spaghetti. We were cleaning up so many messes. Like, what can we do to drive change here? And I thought of something that my dad told me, which is when you're up to your butt in alligators, don't forget the objective was to drain the swamp, right? Like, as you start to make progress on your issue, the challenges are going to arise. Things are going to get harder. So as I'm thinking through this, I'm like, all right, I got to figure out why we're doing this. What's my North Star? What all these things align towards? It's recycled. Somebody wants to use mushroom leather. I'm like, oh, my bio-based fibers. Like, what do I do? And that's when the Paris Climate Accords and the Sustainable Development Goal number 13 snapped into place. It was climate. That's what we're really truly talking about. So that is where this came from. And I apologize, it's a bit of an eye chart, and I had to have our marketing team give me a PNG of this from our annual impact report. That is the 2022 carbon footprint of outdoor research. And I just loved the presentation from Intel earlier today. I sat at their table and was saying some of these things. We have such a drastically different carbon footprint than most of you in the room in the apparel industry. Our Scope 1 emissions are so tiny. Scope 2 is 0 for my organization. We're 100% renewable energy, because guess how much we use? Like none. For 2 US-based sewing facilities, the entire output of those sewing factories is electricity and it's waste. And most of the waste is so efficient. Everyone's like, well, efficiency in your waste and your manufacturing stream, our cutting markers are like 97% effective. We throw away the skins of goats that we use for the hand, like leather and handwear. It looks like Swiss cheese. I mean, they're able to get those things down to where it's razor thin when they die cut all that stuff. So there is no waste. So our carbon footprint is inexplicably linked to people overseas where we don't have any control. So just like the previous conversation was such a great tee up, so much of what we need to tackle in our industry is actually not something we can control. So how do we do that, right? Like, what do we do about that? So at the same time that I kind of came to this realization, we were going through our GHG inventory and preparing to start addressing our climate change goals. So here was the problem. It was OR's carbon footprint. If a project or an idea didn't contribute to our carbon goals and our climate goals, why would we invest in those resources? So this data is actually year number 2, year number 3 is coming, but quickly the focus sharpened. Scope 3 is 98%. 90% of that is purchased goods and services, and 78% is raw materials. I'm Senior Director of Materials, Innovation, and Sustainability. So I work in this really weird cross-section where I don't have a lot of adult supervision. That's one of my jokes. I like to say that to people and they laugh. I'm like, seriously, I don't really report to anybody. I don't really have a job description. So when it comes to purchased goods and services, raw materials is a problem, I'm like, we got to fix that. I'm like, that's me. So I start making decisions unilaterally, and we're making some of those things. But like Intel shared earlier, and it might have been during the breakout, we just started doing things because it was the right thing to do. And it was before we had a strategy. It's before we had done a carbon footprint. It's before we had an inventory. So some of the progress that we've made, I can't report on. I can't tell you. I don't even have the data to show you what we did. We just started buying recycled materials because it was the right thing to do. So we actually got the cart in front of the horse. We started throwing spaghetti at the wall before we had a management system in place to track the actions that we had made. So SBTI, somebody mentioned that earlier as well, that you can't talk about that. So we launched our climate goals, and all of a sudden we're like, we're already hitting our climate goals in Scope 1 and Scope 2 because our Scope 2 is 0. So like we put this thing up, and everyone's like, what are you doing to get to that point? I'm like, we did it. We're done. Like, wait, I don't understand. I'm like, I can't really show that because of the way we started early, and it's this big confusing knot, a smear of beautiful marinara across the wall that I can't talk about with customers. So all that does is make our immediate dealers and consumers more confused and be like, wait, I don't understand. What's OR doing? So you're not doing anything? Well, we're trying to address the hardest part, and I can't do that in 1 year. Does that make sense? Okay. So if raw materials was on the previous icon slide, clearly we don't have a very good GHG reduction strategy in place. So mushroom leather is a good example. The other one is bio-based fibers. Everyone is all hot on bio-based right now in the textile world. Here's a problem. Everyone I've talked to in the raw material side, which is the other area of my responsibility, I ask, cool, I love that that's a bio-based material. Do you have an LCA on that fiber? Does it use less energy? Because everything I'm hearing is that lots of the bio-based stocks and some of the chemically recycled nylon fishing nets require more energy to be produced back into a fiber. How is that furthering our carbon footprint goals? And but it's bio-based. How about biodegradability? Think about everything you have on right now. Pick a piece of apparel you're wearing and think about it. Is it monomaterial? Do you think that you can take that thing and recycle it immediately? You have to cut zippers out of jackets. You have to take buttons off. Sometimes the label on the back neck of your garment is a different fiber or is a non-recyclable fiber. So there's so much complexity in terms of addressing biodegradability. Great, the insulation in your puffy jacket is biodegradable. Might help with microfibers, which, by the way, we didn't have a report for a while or a test method. You can't bury that jacket in your backyard, right? So there's so much complexity built into the apparel world. I'm not even yet addressing the supply chain's lack of transparency. I'm talking about very practical things we get asked on a daily basis, right? Any questions real quick before I dive through, because now we're gonna get a little more specific. Okay, there'll be plenty of time for questions and later. So what are we doing about GHGs in the raw material side, right? This was my focus. This is what I do. This is what I love to do in some senses. I'm in a position now where I don't go to Asia and solve problems. I don't go to supplier meetings and pick fabrics. I send people to do that. So it's kind of hard for me at some point, right? So these are 4 big hot spots. I already kind of touched on one, but recycled materials. You can't recycle your way out of a problem. We actually went through a significant amount of work, and it might be in one of my future slides, but we actually did the calculations on our carbon footprint. If we recycled every fiber input, bought a recycled fiber input, for every fiber that can be recycled, can't recycle spandex, you can't recycle some things, right? What would be the carbon footprint savings? It's like half of what our goal is. So just switching to recycled inputs doesn't even get us halfway there because there's things we can't actually get, right? You start to talk about economic feasibility versus technical feasibility, that goes squarely into the economic side. I can't afford to recycle everything as an input. So we're not gonna be able to get out of that. There's another regulatory pressure I want you to remember in a few minutes when we come back. There's a regulatory pressure that's gonna set recycled textiles back probably 15 years in the state of California. Sorry if that's where you're from. Bio-based, I talked about that one. Seaweed species, soy meal, natural extracts, pulps, fiber, starch, sugarcane bagasse, I don't even know what that is, right? Like coconut shell extract. You can't make fiber out of that at the bulk production level. We're talking about H&M level production, Target, Walmart, Amazon. We're never gonna be able to use coconut shells and make fiber for all of humanity for every concert t-shirt they wanna buy, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about in terms of scale and scope. People all the time are like, well, make your goods more durable. It's a durability challenge. Some of those raw materials aren't as durable. And by the way, my industry makes some of the most durable products when you talk about apparel. You know, things that protect you from death on mountainsides. We're not making cotton t-shirts. So I kind of struggle with that sometimes. I'm like, we're already there. Some of the other industries might be working on durability. We're working on trying to keep durability when we make different input decisions. Kind of think back to semiconductors a little bit of how you probably struggle with some of the same things. One of you said, if a chemistry is just slightly wrong, your thing doesn't work the way it's supposed to work. You know, we feel that. We also produce for the US military and allied forces. So if I'm working with a special forces team on a glove for them to jump out of an airplane at 40,000 feet and they want to be able to use their gun when their boots hit the ground, that's a different level of challenge. Performance is important. Number 3, monomaterials. You can't make everything out of polyester. We'll go back to the 70s. I'm just gonna leave it there. I mean, if you were alive in the 70s, you probably know what I'm talking about. Like, you just can't. And then this is one of my favorites, textiles to textiles recycling. Man, what an awesome idea for circularity. If you can take that concert t-shirt that stinks, that's stretched out, that you don't wear anymore, that your kid's like, really, mom, dad, seriously? Throw it in a bin, it goes somewhere, it gets turned into another t-shirt. And what people don't always necessarily understand is that there's a verticality to recycling, upcycling, downcycling, upstream, downstream, et cetera. Your t-shirt doesn't make another t-shirt. Your t-shirt goes into a dog bed. It goes into carpeting for your automobiles. You know, it goes into industrial installations. There was a big project, somebody, might be like Levi's or somebody, was insulating houses in the Caribbean with, nodding, thank you, I'm getting this right, with denim, jeans. They were insulating houses with jeans. We're not making apparel out of apparel. And when we make apparel out of recycled inputs, put the coconut shells to the side, it's plastic water bottles. It's recycled fishing net. It's scraps from the cutting floor, if we're lucky. It's other types of plastics. So there's a verticality here to say, this is really challenging, but don't focus on it because we're not actually recycling clothes into clothes yet. I don't think we're thinking about that in terms of the interconnectedness. I love to come to these conferences and be like, where's my plastic bottle people? I want to like get your card, right? Like that's the relationships that we cross industry at events like this are not doing, right? Okay, so barriers to success. This is definitely where I want to try really hard to give you some things that I've been thinking about in terms of how you take it back to your organization to think about getting through some barriers as well. So, yeah, okay, good. Same slide. So here's one. Anybody aware of what PFAS is? I know, smile, some of us already talked about it a little bit. You have a lot of hands, that's good. This is a real problem for my industry right now. Big problem. And frankly, this is probably going to put us back about 10 to 15 years in terms of several parts of sustainability as an industry. So let's quickly talk about that. So what the heck is PFAS? Most notably, it's super persistent. It doesn't break down in nature. I guarantee you right now, if we all took a blood test in this room, every single one of you have it in your blood. I just did a presentation on this topic at the University of Washington recently, and there was somebody in the room who I didn't know who was an activist and got really upset when I said that, and I was like, okay, but like, fact. I'm not making political statements here, it's a fact. So clearly an issue, right? Generally, it is something for invented for non-stick or for weather resistance properties. So if you see on the image to the right, this awesome jacket I designed several years ago, water hits it, it beads up, it rolls right off. That is something that will change as we get out of a PFAS-based or a fluorinated-based DWR, durable water repellency. So there are real-world performance implications that every single person in this room are going to experience when we phase out of PFAS that we are going to struggle to explain why your jacket doesn't work as well to save the planet. So several legislations are pending, and there's some that are in place, and there's known harmful effects to humans in certain situations. If you live within, I don't know, I think it's like 10 miles, the aquifer distance from an airport or a military airfield, it's a serious issue where you live. Because when it's in its liquid form, it's non-polymerized and it goes into the groundwater, it gets quicker into your bloodstream. That's a big issue, and it causes all kinds of cancer rate and birth defect rates immediately around those areas. That's a clear situation. Who got Starbucks this morning or takeout coffee? Guess what's lined your coffee cup with? It's got PFAS in it. It's in jackets, it's in apparel, it's in the slice of paper that goes in your pizza box. You know, there are so many other places. When it's polymerized and it's a plastic, it doesn't enter your bloodstream. So banning it in outerwear is one of the worst things we could do to this stuff. And I hate saying this out loud. I do it anyway, so don't worry. But if you're a citizen in the state of California, and we talked to one earlier, sorry, I'm going to say that thing I said earlier a second time, you will not benefit first from banning PFAS from apparel. Where will those benefits be? People I care about and I work with and I have friends around the world. It's the supply chain. It's the person that stands over the machine and dumps blue barrels of this stuff into a big industrial machine. They're the ones exposed to it 70 hours a week, 6 days a week, for 45 years of their life. So if we want to talk about impacts in the world and some equity and DEI related stuff, this is actually a DEI situation for the outdoor industry, not a sustainability issue. And nobody thinks like that. So this is going to cause a significant amount of bandwidth, and we don't know where this stuff is in the supply chain. It's too opaque. We're finding it in enamels used to coat zippers. It's a release agent, because remember non-stick, it's a release agent in making plastic injection molded buckles and triglides and sliders. It's everywhere. So 100 parts per million of PFAS in textiles, it's functionally impossible for us to completely get rid of it in 18 months. There was no bandwidth. There was no time frame. We didn't know this was coming to some of the earlier conversations. So this is going to be an issue. And I can't remember when I was going to talk about this, but we'll just do it now because I'm a little off script. Let's talk real quick about mechanical recycling and circularity, turning your t-shirts into t-shirts. Let's take a pair of DWR-coated swimwear. If you've worn swimwear or board shorts in the past, one of the reasons, high spandex content, they're really stretchy, they're really comfortable, they fit real nice, they hug your body in all the right places. That spandex wants to absorb moisture. They get wet, they get soggy. Have you ever had a pair of swimwear after a few years where you just can't seem to dry it out really quickly? We use in the industry a durable water repellency to help with that. Great, now you're gonna take that swimsuit, you're gonna drop it in a box, we're gonna turn it into a new swimsuit. If you're grinding that up, turning it into chips, and then re-extruding it into fiber with the dye, all the chemicals, everything included in it, and we're turning it into a fiber and putting it right back into a product and selling it in the state of California, what happened to that PFAS? We're gonna fail that test. I can't sell that in the state of California, which is the 5th largest economy in the world, which functionally is changing PFAS markets around the entire globe. Even in Japan, I'm arguing with suppliers who think they can continue to use it. So if we ban PFAS at 100 parts per million in new articles, which is the magic word, in the state of California, you are functionally banning mechanical recycled polyester in the world. No one is talking about this. Nobody is putting these things together. No one is playing chess and 3 moves ahead to understand the implications. Mechanically recycled polyester is one of the easiest ways for us to recycle it. This is a humongous concern to people in this room when we're banning one of the cheapest ways to recycle products back into textiles. So all the other work I'm doing, this is just like, I don't even know how to start. It's painful. It's causing a bunch of pain. So let's put that to the side and talk about other barriers. Come on, clicker. Which are sustainability barriers. So I got a ton of notes on this slide. Barriers arise. Things happen. Adjustments will be made. You're going to notice a very transparent lack of textile specificity here because I want you to think about things at a higher level and what are relevant for your organization. So I broke it down into kind of three levels. And I know this clicker's not working as well. Come on. There we go. Technical things. Where and how do I start? Some of the people in this room are helping you with that potentially. Think about what is the industry guideline. We talked about scraping people together within an industry to create consortiums or action groups or coalitions to start talking about this. That is a great way to get started. Struggles in data. Getting our carbon footprint pulled together the first time took 3 years. We just didn't have data. We didn't want to use a financial estimate. We wanted to use primary data because when we did the financial estimate and then suffered through the primary data equivalency for some of those areas, it was 30% or more over-exaggerating our carbon footprint. I'm not going to pay for credits against that, and we can all debate credits are good, credits are bad, offsets, yada, yada. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, some organizations like REI are taking the opposite approach of what was discussed this morning and saying, no, we are paying for an offset or a credit for our entire carbon footprint as a financial means to force change. If we don't make change, we continue to pay as an organization, polluting the planet. Some people are nodding. I see people going, okay, that's one way to look at it, right? How about supply chain opacity? Everybody struggles with knowing their supply chain as well as they want. That would make a lot of sense. I love this one, technical feasibility or economic feasibility. Every time we talk about, yeah, but why can't you? Or there is a way to. Okay, maybe it's technically feasible, but can you afford it? We're going to talk about this in a hot second, but it's going to be decision making, right? Economic feasibility is still something that everyone in this room probably struggles with around sustainability. So am I doing it right? Am I doing a good job? This is a lonely place. How many people have their presidents or executive teams go, can we chat for a minute? I want to tell you about how great of a job you guys are doing. Do you hear that very often? Like, I don't. Oh, good for you. Somebody does. Awesome. I mean, I get some positive feedback too, but like, they don't go out of their way to be like, hey, all the problems you're causing everyone else in the organization, great job on that. I don't. But good, you should. We should get more credit for what we're accomplishing for our organizations. But the fact of the matter is, at some level, there is a bit of a question of like, I'm doing something nobody's ever done in my org before. I don't know if I'm doing it right or doing a good job. great, I'm doing it. Am I doing it right? Those are challenges. How about process barriers? This is a big one, especially the bigger you get or the more complex your footprint might be. Oh boy, legacy style decision making. Everything comes down to revenue or profit. I'm an innovation guy. Innovation's in my title. Good and classic innovation management comes down to what you do to grow profit, revenue, or market share for your organization. I can't stand that because at some level, there's also change. There's also impact. We talked about social changes at some point this morning. Those are things that are non-ROI driving for your organization that we all play into. So legacy style decision making is something I talk about in our organization all the time. Like, don't ask me how much it's going to cost, because you're not going to like the answer, right? But tying things back to, and this was discussed earlier as well, how else can you roll up that ROI? So for example, for us, it was REI. How many people have ever been in an REI before? I'm going to say probably most people in the room, right? They are saying, if you don't do these things, we won't buy your brand anymore. It's pretty good ROI for me. I'm like, here's the spend. Let's go do a carbon footprint because they said we got to, or we're never selling them anything ever again. That started to really crystallize that. We're based in Seattle. They're based in Seattle. We're kind of like neighbors. We kind of have a special relationship in the same city. That was a huge sort of specific financial wedge I was able to use that says you have to do something. So how about executive or board buy-in? I didn't really struggle with that issue much, fortunately, and I took it for granted because I hear so many other people say, how do you ever get anyone to say yes? I didn't struggle with that to some extent, which is kind of interesting. I struggled with the one above. They said yes, but. Budget, we all have budget problems. We don't have to go there. Bandwidth, we all have no bandwidth. I just lost my sustainability person who was supposed to come with me. He just moved on. Great for him, great role. He did so much for us and took us so far, but now I'm back to a team of a half. We used to have 1.5. I'm the half. Lack of a North Star, we talked about that. You have to have some guidance to say, when things get messy, what are you going to go back to and look at? Mission, values, a goal, some form of structure. It's in your bonus, like it's in your compensation. There has to be some other reason that you can go back to and say, that's awesome, that's important, but we're not going to do it. Or maybe it is, and we have to find some way to do it because it's important to our customers, our clients, our employees, et cetera. That's another reason to then work on it from a bandwidth perspective. But if you're going back to your North Star, it's a quick way to sort of shed the sides. Okay, last one. We're almost done, I promise. Hang with me. Hidden barriers. This is one that I actually kind of struggled with a little bit. Like, what do I say about hidden ones? Like, if I know it, it's not hidden anymore. So I started kind of going through here and saying, all right, greenwashing. Everyone has classically known what greenwashing is. I'm not even reading my notes, but there's a quote in here. Do you know that no matter what you say, according to the FTC, what matters is the consumer's perception of your claim? Do you guys struggle with that? We do, because I can say anything I want about the good we do, and consumers like, I don't understand that, so therefore you're greenwashing me. I mean, literally that happens. So greenwashing is a huge issue in terms of me being really aggressive in the boardroom to say, dear marketing, don't say anything unless our team looks at it. You guys want to say it smart. I want to say it right. Let's work together. Seriously, I had that conversation with them. They're like, yeah, you're probably right. And now we have a really good strategy, and we're going to start talking to the consumer in a smart, educated, detailed manner. We're 2 years too late because we couldn't argue on how we wanted to say the message, but we're working on it. Bigger and more important is, how many people have ever heard of the term green hushing? This is kind of new in the last year. Not many people. Green hushing is actually the secondary effect of what happened with greenwashing. Green hushing is that you're so terrified to say something publicly, you decide not to say something because you're worried about FTC, you're worried about regulators, you're worried, a lot of smiles, now you're getting it, or you're worried that your consumer is going to attack you. And one of the examples we used earlier was some of the things we do in our factory base, good things we do for humanity, for workers, for some of our supply chain. You guys hear all the time about bad, evil things that happen in making apparel overseas in Bangladesh. I didn't tell you this yet. We're owned by a multinational publicly traded Korean corporation that has a ginormous stake in production in Bangladesh. So we struggle with it because not only do we say, yeah, there are problems in Bangladesh in producing garments, most of our stuff comes from there, and our owner has that factory. So I can't even do independent audits because it's my owner. How do I talk about that when it's so easy to take it out of context and argue with us or point out all these other things? Yeah, but we don't talk about it. Is that the right thing to do? No, We should be talking about what we are trying to do, are trying to accomplish. All of you are doing things in your industries and doing things in your organizations, and you're not talking about them because of fear of negativity. How do we change the world and reduce climate change impact if we don't talk about it? This is a huge issue. Regulatory issues and pressures. Again, I think everybody in here is pretty clear on what those are and the impacts, but that's a hidden thing that you don't know sometimes. This new, I didn't even put a slide together because it's so new, but the new TSCA reporting situation for PFAS, that came from nowhere. And I don't know how we're going to achieve it over the next 8 years. That's taking bandwidth away from positivity and good projects we want to do that we have a roadmap for and a plan for and budget and resources. We can't do it. How about generational differences? Do I need to go into that? Is that too awkward? Like, we could talk about it, but like, how many of your organizations are old white guys? How about old Korean billionaires? That's a different challenge. But think about it. I'll crystallize it into this thought process. Let's talk about China. I've worked very hard and throughout my career in China extensively is what I was looking for. I was just in China in September. I got really sick. I thought I had COVID again while I was in China. But I'm now working with second and third generation Chinese businessmen who are no longer the sort of grow, sell, everything is volume. We want to grow. The chairman is chain smoking in the corner, doesn't speak English, and just is solely focused on growth, just hard driving on price. Is that a stereotype? It is, 100%. Do you know why stereotypes are a thing? Because they're generally sometimes right, and that was what we dealt with in that day. We took translators with us because we couldn't even communicate with those factory owners. I was in China and met with two companies in September who are younger. They're my age. They speak English fluently. They are so focused on all the other aspects of the business. They're highly attuned to, if I don't do this thing, I can't grow my business because these other people. They're partnership focused. They want to interact with us. They say, what can we do to mean more to you? I know there's a problem. I'm going to fix it because I want to stay with you. I want your business. I enjoy our partnership. Those are the people that we want to work with. It's second generational. There's just a difference to it. So think about that in terms of working with your executives. I'm guaranteed there's a difference in how you present or pitch to this one versus that one. It sucks, but those are real challenges that sustainability people have to overcome when you're putting together a pitch to say, this middle-level manager has to say yes to get something accomplished on their team. I can't just recycle a slide deck, right? So those are issues we're going to focus as the boomer age retires and other people are taking up behind. They don't have the same decision-making set. The younger generations right now care about this stuff immensely and they're paying attention. So our greenwashing that led to green hushing is now having an even more amplified effect because the younger generations are making decisions based on what you're marketing. The overwhelming statistics are that these younger generations pay attention to what you market over anything else, even certifications. They don't care about that. So we're literally doing ourselves a disservice. How about complex pressures on the end consumer? It's an election year, inflation's up, inflation's down, the currency's good, the currency's bad. All those things in a consumer-driven market are highly influenceable to how much budget I get. I can't hire another person this year because business slowed down, because the industry has too much inventory, because of COVID. We're still dealing with COVID this many years later. These are hidden issues. Does this resonate with you and your business and what you do, your organizations? Did I step on at least one or two toes because I fully expected that? That's okay. We're having hard conversations. Okay. So one of the things that I kind of come back to, and I've used this before, this slide I actually did recycle, so sorry about that. Big projects, big impacts sometimes require asking your team or yourself big questions. So here's 5 that have helped me through tough moments. So at the end of my struggle, we aligned on the near-term approach, which was to stop throwing spaghetti and align to a North Star. So number 1, are we confident we understand the bigger picture? Number 2, is there a bigger strategic approach that we can adopt? Number 3, how can we make bigger decisions without bigger timelines? I know you get asked that and you're like, oh, geez. Seriously though, like you should ask that question. Sometimes you get really novel answers. Number 4, do we need a bigger budget? Pretty often the answer is yes, but like those are questions you should ask. And number 5, do we need a bigger team to accelerate progress? I'm a team of 1.5. The person that I hired very clearly over-amplified our achievements in the 2.5 some years he worked for me. And I was able to now take that back and say, you cannot refuse to let me backfill that position this year. Look at what we've accomplished. Here's what we've done. Here's what things that are now in jeopardy that person's not here. I'm literally writing paperwork to come back to a non-compliance on a recycled claims audit, something or other, whatever. And I'm like, I don't even know where to go to do that. And you really want me doing that right now? Does that seem like it's a good use of bandwidth? And they're like, no, of course not. Well, you have to backfill this role. These are good questions that you can use up your org, down your org, and to yourself. So for us, it kind of snapped into the 5 impact focuses. We need to complete our GHG inventory. We needed to pick some low-hanging fruit. I think somebody earlier today said, you got to get a quick, easy win. Those are really, truly things that you need. Number 3 was make marketing happy. Everybody likes a happy marketing team. Build a roadmap and a strategy. That one's been brought up several times. And it was set targets and plan. This was how we started to address our impact. Okay. So thank you. We made it. We're at the summit. That was a tough journey. You probably stepped on some toes. You may have speared yourself with a crampon a little bit on your leg. That's okay. Any questions? Rotten vegetables you want to throw? Yes, ma'am. Right. Ooh, that one. Yeah, what a great question. So it's kind of a 2-part. One was fast fashion, what's happening to change that? And number 2 is that changing consumer mentality. Let's break those apart. So I don't work in fast fashion, thankfully, but what I can say from what I do within the industry is that is one of the things we are looking at first in terms of, it's kind of a 2-part answer. One of it is the waste, because we're generating an awful lot of waste. But then secondarily is if we can figure out how to reuse that waste for feedstock across the wider industry, there actually is an opportunity in there. So we're like, don't sell as much stuff, don't consume as much. Well, maybe we just need to continue doing that and figure out how to use that waste better, right? So today, and I was on a call a while back with somebody from Goodwill. I'm trying to remember where that was. The statistics of how much stuff goes to Goodwill and just gets thrown away is staggering. Staggering. And they don't know what else to do with it. So part of the solution that's happening within the textile industry is that circularity set up to say, how do we create a place for you to throw away apparel? You don't put it in your curb, you know, where you put all your, I live in Seattle, we're spoiled and we're liberal, I get it. We have a trash can, a recycling can, and we have a compost bin. And if you put compost in your trash can, you can get fined to the point where they actually will stop collecting your garbage. It's kind of awesome if you think about it, but I can throw t-shirts away and no one says a word. So at some point, we're gonna need to set up some kind of a collection mechanism. I think we've tried that across the industry at several brands. I'm actually working on one of those right now. There's a couple of fiber suppliers that you can send mono-material things to, so polyester, and they can mechanically recycle it for you in North Carolina, free of charge. Enter PFAS, which is gonna be probably problematic for that. So fast fashion needs to figure out how to deal with the waste, probably in the same scale as they do buying better inputs, which is cost, and fast fashion is more cost sort of, they care about the cost more. What's the word I'm looking for? It has a bigger impact on the end product. If the t-shirt goes up $2, for us, it's like, who cares? That market, it matters, right? So consumer mindsets, I don't know. That's something that we're trying to deal with. I think for me, it's education and transparency. And that goes back to green hushing. I'm gonna take a stand in the next year and put some things out there, and I'm starting to do it in some interviews right now where I'm being a little more honest and open about these struggles. Maybe not to the level I would in a safe space, right? But we're starting to talk about some of those things and basically tell the consumer, here's what this means when you want to buy a recycled textile. Let's break that down into the 3 things you should know as a consumer. And maybe they're like, wow, I had no idea. Great, we've just educated you to change your mindset. I think that's a big piece of it. What else? I have no idea where we are in time.
We're running over time, but we could take one more.
Still have the breakout.
Yep.
Sweet. Oh, last minute.
Are there any industries that you've identified that could potentially provide either solutions or partial solutions to some of the things you're dealing with. And second part, in the outdoor industry, you've got a lot of hard goods companies and soft goods companies.
Yeah.
Are each of them able to transfer any knowledge between the two?
Yeah, so great questions. I mean, the first and foremost, again, is plastics. I think that we need to do, as human beings, a better job of understanding how plastics are used, where they come from, how to reuse them, upscale, downscale, upmarket, downmarket. Those are things we need to do. The challenge is that they don't want to work with us. Because when you talk about Coca-Cola Corporation and plastic bottles, the scale that they operate at, we are a fly on the elephant in terms of how much we need. So we're struggling to get them to work with us as much as we want to work with them. The second question then is hard goods. Yeah, and that's not my area of expertise, but my work at the industry level would suggest the biggest is steel. If, we've been conditioned as an industry to a pretty crazy level that reusable drinkware, it's like, what's the sustainability impact of my entire closet full of reusable drinkware versus how many plastic cups I've thrown away in the last 10 years? Moving that to recycled was really hard. Similar issues, it was MOQ, but like, think about the bicycle industry. I know I'm from Seattle, I bike commute to work every day, but like the metal and the components, the lubricants that go into bicycles, it's pretty staggering. SRAM is a company out of, I believe, Minnesota. We actually worked with them a little bit at Outdoor Research to sort of share some info and collaborate on a few things because it was so dovetailing nicely of completely different industry, different inputs, but the challenges, the methodology, the process that we were working through was exactly the same. So I think at some level, it's they have a different supply chain struggle than we do, but the problems are the same. So we're trying to work together more than, yeah, it's hard goods. Those guys are just, they're like, no, we need to like work together. North Star. Cool. Thank you.